In his first interview since announcing his decision not to run for president in 2016, Joe Biden revealed to Norah O'Donnell his relationship with Hillary Clinton and his thoughts on Donald Trump.
Here's part of what didn't air last night on 60 Minutes.
You wouldn't have considered running for president unless you thought or had some doubts about Hillary Clinton.
Not at all. That has nothing to do with it. I've said from the beginning, look, I like Hillary. Hillary and I get along together. The only reason to run is because I still think I could do a better job than anybody else could do. Whether I run or not has nothing to do with whether Hillary is going to run. For example, when Hillary decided to run, she called me and said, can I come and have breakfast? We had breakfast in that room once a week for 4 years when she was Secretary of State. She came down and she said, Joe, have you decided what you're going to do? And I said, Hillary, I'm not in a position to be able to make that decision right now. She knew intuitively what I meant. She said, well, I've decided to run, Joe. And we shook hands. I said, Hillary, if I run, it'll be a great race between us. And if I don't run, I wish you the best of luck. That's the nature of our relationship.
So can you say right now you will give Hillary Clinton 100% of your support?
If she's the nominee, I will give her 120% of my support. Look, she and I have been friends for years. We served together in the Senate. We served together when she was the Secretary of State. We disagree, just like I disagree with the president on some things. Go back and find anybody who says for the 4 years we worked together, Hillary and I weren't friends.
What do you think of Donald Trump?
Norah, I've been in this business for a long time. There's nobody that I have personal animus to. I'm disappointed in Donald Trump. I know what a showman and all that he is, but I really don't think it's healthy, and I hope he reconsiders this sort of attack on all immigrants. I think that is beneath the country. I don't think it's where the American people are, and I hope he really doesn't believe it.
Following your announcement, I don't know if you know this, but Trump tweeted, I think Joe Biden made the correct decision for him and his family. Personally, I would rather run against Hillary because her record is so bad. Trump thinks you would be the tougher opponent.
Look, I don't believe. Look, Donald Trump is knows how to appeal to the base of his party very well, and I'm not gonna. I don't know what he believes on that.
Well, Norah O'Donnell is here to talk a little bit about that interview. You know, the vice president was certainly looked at ease. His comments were very candid, particularly about Hillary Clinton. You know, there had been a lot of speculation about what people called jabs that he had made, possibly towards her. But it seems like they have a good working relationship.
Well, he says they were friends when she served in the Senate together. They were friends when she served as Secretary of State in the Obama administration, and that they had a weekly breakfast. And so he said, I dare anyone to find someone that can say that we didn't have a good working relationship. He said, I did disagree with her on a number of issues, but much has been written about that relationship. But I think what the vice president was trying to say is that his decision whether to get in or not get in was about whether he was going to be ready, whether his family was ready, and whether there was a pathway to victory, given that his son, Beau, died just barely 5 months ago. So I think he wanted to set up that clearly he would have still gotten in if Hillary were in if he could have, but he just couldn't because of what's happened this year.
Mm-hmm. Norah, you interviewed him separately, and you also interviewed him with his wife, Dr. Biden, who clearly played devil's advocate both ways. So you were surprised by that?
I was. I mean, I've known the vice president for a long time, since he was in the Senate. I've known Dr. Biden. She's one of the least political people I know. When he was in the Senate for 30 years, she was never in Washington. She was back home in Delaware, raising the kids, being a teacher. She just really wasn't into the political scene. So to me, it was very interesting to see that she really wanted him to run for president, that she played, as you said, the devil's advocate, saying, well, what about the Supreme Court? What about education? What about the future of community colleges is if you don't run for president? So that did surprise me that she was pushing him. I thought maybe she would be the one counseling him, saying, we're not ready, Joe, the family's not ready. But it appears the entire family was on board if he was going to make this a contest. He did say something that was not in the piece. He said, if the first primary caucus were April 1st, that would have been enough time for me. So it's interesting he thought about that timeline.
Yeah. How did this whole interview come about?
It's taken me about 3.5, 4 years.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a request in to interview the president for years. Mary Hager, who's the executive producer of Face the Nation, even sent me an email, said, well, it only took you 4 years, Norah. But remember, the vice president does so few interviews. One of the last big interviews he had done was, I believe, in late 2011, I think 2012 on Meet the Press, where he advocated for same-sex marriage. And that then put President Obama in a very uncomfortable position, because then he had to come out in favor of same-sex marriage. So there was always few opportunities that the vice president had to sit down for a longer extended interview. He did small little things on specific issues, small interviews, I mean, meaning when it related to the Violence Against Women Act or other big administrative issues, but not a long-form interview like this, extraordinarily rare. And so we had been pushing for that sort of access for that many years, and I guess it finally paid off.
Let's talk about the timing a little bit, because here it is, this big interview, and it hasn't even been 5 months since the death of Beau, his son. You asked him about that, and he really put that story that has been circulating to rest. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, much had been made about this so-called deathbed wish from Beau Biden. It had been first reported in the Wall Street Journal that while Beau was sick, he had asked his dad to run for president, or encouraged him to run for president. Then Maureen Dowd, in a column, had said that that it was Beau's essentially dying wish that his father promised him that he would run for president. Then subsequent articles called that a deathbed wish, sort of wrote that it was a deathbed wish. And then there was an article in Politico that suggested that Vice President Biden had leaked that story himself to Maureen Dowd in the New York Times as an advertisement for a potential presidential race. He said nothing like that ever happened, meaning the deathbed wish. He said this idea of this Hollywood-esque moment where Beau, his son, is lying there and grabbed his hand, and he said, "Do it, Dad, win one for the Gipper," as he said. It just never happened that way. And he goes in this clip that we played this morning on CBS This Morning into the explanation about why people may have been confused about a meeting they had, a dinner they had back in October, where they sat across the table and his son described to him his desire to see his dad run, but to do whatever he thought was right. So I think he also tried to say, look, there was a consistency. My son always wanted me to run for president. But it was a very important distinction to hear him make about, and put some more clarity around what has been described as this sort of final moment. I also think that the situation of Beau's illness is still so private, and his brain cancer, that it's not public about his final months. And I think that the family would like for that to remain private, but I think that would also cast some doubt on whether there was this so-called moment at the last moment where Beau had this deathbed wish.
But he did share some personal stories about Biden's daughters and what they have said to him when he shows up, and it really just tugged at your heart listening to him.
Well, a lot of people emailed me and said, boy, I started crying during the interview at that point, where he describes his granddaughter, Beau Biden's daughter, being at the pool this summer. And here they were all the vice president thinking he's in a good place, and then his granddaughter hugging him and saying, "You smell like Daddy. You smell like Daddy." And those are the kinds of, I think, up and down moments you have. And I think, as the vice president described, for anyone who's lost a child, the grieving process is different for everyone, but it's a very painful process. In a clip we have not played, though, he also talks about how difficult it is for a marriage to stay together when a couple has lost a child. It's very, very difficult, the grieving process. So I think that's part of the context. We've known that his family was going to be an important factor in this, but the grief that the vice president and his family have gone through at the same time of having to make this momentous decision about whether to pour your whole heart and soul into a presidential contest. I think he thinks he was ready to do it emotionally, but then they realized there was no pathway to victory. Right. It was too late.
But, when they look at the interview, you can see how at ease he is. It feels like he is definitely comfortable with the decision that he has made, which is remarkable considering all the stories that we hear about him wanting to be president for pretty much his entire political career.
Right. So I think the next question is what's next for Joe Biden? I mean, Hillary Clinton said history is not done with Joe Biden. I asked him, would you run for office again? He said no. There's been a lot of speculation that he would go back to Delaware and run for governor to honor his son. He ruled that out in our interview. I should note, however, there is no constitutional ban on a vice president serving more than 2 terms. Would Hillary Clinton ask Joe Biden to be her vice president if she becomes the nominee? There wouldn't be a constitutional a ban on that, or sort of, impediment, I should say, to that happening. But I didn't ask him about that. But so we'll see. It's hard for me to believe that Joe Biden will leave the vice presidency and that we wouldn't hear a lot from him. He indicated he and Obama have some plans to work on something together.
Before you go, there was a lighthearted moment when his dog interrupted the interview. Let's look at that for a second. Let's take a look at the clip.
He's big, right?
Yeah, he's big. He's a talker. Watch this. Hey, champ, you want to play golf? Well, where's the golf club? Well, go get the golf club. Well, go get the golf club.
It's about the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, go get the golf club. All right, watch this. Okay, let's go get it. Let's get the golf club. Let's get it. Watch this. You ready? You ready? Now, don't knock the cameraman down. We can't go out that door.
Hilarious.
This is a 105-pound German Shepherd. I think probably one of the most well-behaved dogs I've ever been around. Sat through about an hour-long interview quiet. The only time he made some noise is when I started asking the vice president about Hillary Clinton. He seemed a little... And then at the very end, it was clear he wanted to go outside and play some golf. But the vice president appeared to be having a full conversation with his dog, Champ. So it was a nice, lighthearted moment at the end of the interview.
Yes.
Yeah, very cute.
Norah O'Donnell, thanks so much for coming by.
Guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.